when I first started breaking, it was original, but it was really whack. That's lesson number one that I learned. Originality is not enough. It's dope, but it's not enough. You can't just like only for the sake of originality do something that looks really crappy because you don't have your foundation.
Okay, we're here with Zeshen from Havikoro. Real pleasure to have you here today with us, and yeah, just sharing your thoughts and everything. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Everything's good with you?
Yeah. We were just kind of talking about this right before. Like we're kind of in very different time zones, so it's like 10 p.m. here and 8 a.m. I think for you right now.
Yeah, 8 a.m. man.
Yeah, almost completely opposite. So
which
yeah,
I'm normally up at this time, but last night I was up late. There was or I got drunk. So no better way to say it. So
it's okay. Me too. Yeah, just at home.
Word.
Anyway, moving on from that. Yeah, usually I get people to just kind of introduce themselves. So for anyone who doesn't know who you are, do you mind just getting into a little bit about yourself and your history and where you come from, how you got into the dance, and anything else you want to say?
Yeah, man. All right, well, what's up, everybody? My name is Zeshen. I'm from Houston, Texas. At least I've lived here now for about 4 years. This year I'm 34 years old. And I am a dancer. I'm a b-boy. I venture into other styles, things that I try to do as well, but mainly I break. And I started dancing back in 1999. Always been a Texas b-boy, that's kind of my location. I've been through a lot of different, grew up in a lot of different scenes here in Texas, from Dallas to Austin, and now recently in Houston. And yeah, man, what else about me? How did I get started in breaking? I started when I was really young. So, when you start so young, it's like, when do you know you really start or like, get into it? Right. But I would say like the first time I was really like, oh, I want to do this, I was 12 years old. This was in 1999. And I was at a summer camp and I saw this dude try to do a windmill. I really can't remember what it looked like. I don't know if it was good or not, but the movement was like, oh, what is going on? Like, that was really interesting. So that very first day, those guys were kind of messing around. So I went up there and I was looking and trying to do some stuff. So the first day I started breaking, I learned 2 moves. The very first day, I learned how to do a really rudimentary coffee grinder. And I learned how to do a kung fu like kip up.
I think everyone learns those two.
Yeah. I did those 2 same moves for a whole year without learning anything new.
Right on.
Not a whole year, maybe like half a year. And then, I was like, oh, there must be more to this. And yeah, luckily I was right and found some stuff. It was like the beginnings of, like internet, I guess. And
right.
I had like a dial-up modem, so there was like really old breaking websites like breakdance.com. It was like all orange shit. It was like really, and some move guys that were like, it was like all text, there was no video.
Yeah.
It would be like instructionals on how to do a flare, and it's just like 5 sentences of text.
Yeah.
Like kick your left leg up to your ear.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before, but like for me, I think we kind of started roughly around the same time. I was like maybe a few years later, but like
Oh yeah.
I saw the similar kind of things. Like the first stuff I saw on the internet was like a top rock tutorial, and it's like stick figure diagrams of like how to do just basic
Yeah, it
top
was
rock.
like a animated GIF.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
6 frames long.
Yeah. People are very lucky these days. Yeah.
Man, you telling me? Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, who are some of the people that like when you were first starting out that you saw or that were inspiring to you that kind of helped like shape how you are now and that kind of thing?
The first b-boy that I actually really met and practiced with that was already kind of established in the scene was this guy named Jin. He rep Jive Turkey's group, which is you know, it was a really big crew at that time. And Jin, he was a kind of an iconic b-boy from that era in Texas, for kind of doing a lot of the press styles, freezes and stuff like that, planches, presses, and freezes. So he happened to live in the same suburb as me. Dallas, Texas at the time, I had just moved there from Houston. I wasn't breaking when I first moved to Houston. I was like 9 years old when I first moved to Houston. When I moved to Dallas, we lived in like a little suburb north of it. That was when my family first moved to the suburbs, and there was nobody breaking there, you know, except for Jin. And so somehow I got to meet him. I think it was through the freestylesession.com. They used to have old message boards. Yeah. And I might have posted something, and then one of his crewmates answered. I think it was a guy named Orlando. And then eventually he like introduced me to Jin. I think I sent him like a AOL Instant Messenger text or something. And we started practicing. So he was the one that kind of put me on to originality, you know, like the whole mental approach to breaking in that era. I think, as I remember, it was you got to come original, you know, different scenes have different styles. Once I moved to Austin, which was a few years later, when I was in college, I think I started practicing with Jim when I was like 16. So then when I was like 18, I went to Austin, Texas to go to University of Texas. That's when I met Romeo Navarro. He throws a jam called B-Boy City. And Rudy Rex from Havikoro. And I didn't really, that's when I first learned breaking foundation, really like learned it. It was in Austin. This was like 2005. So I'd been breaking for like almost like 6 years, but you know, there wasn't any real good source of knowledge.
Right.
And
you kind of learn like whatever you can get, right?
Yeah, man, exactly. So watching videos and stuff, but there wasn't like, you know, nobody really showing me what was up. Kind of because the suburb I was in was a little bit isolated. And I was just, you know, I was busy with school. I don't know what it is. Like I was in high school and I was trying to, you know, just keep up. And so I didn't drive down to the inner city that much. But there was also like the sense, you know, back then, especially in Texas, like, even if you did, nobody was going to really take you in and show you stuff. It's like, you kind of have to like know the people, or, you know, just be down with them. And so it wasn't really till I moved to Austin that I found a group of people, you know, like a scene that was like that to me. And man, from then on, it was just people in my crew, you know, and Texas b-boys influenced me. Lil Jon was a big influence for me. Wicked, when he moved to Texas, he actually moved to Austin way back, like in 07, 08.
Oh, really?
And we started practicing together too. And, you know, that was the guy named Dave Rock, who was kind of an underground cat, in Austin. But like from Rudy's generation, you know, he's like an early 90s b-boy. And yeah, these are among the people I would probably name as my biggest direct influences. Yeah.
Damn. Yeah, like I know Dave Rock, and I mean lots of people know Rudy Rex, but you guys had that like Bleeding the Block kind of series, and Wicked too was on there too.
Yeah.
That's a random little tangent, but maybe we can get into that. Like what's kind of the story behind that?
It was really just when me and Rudy first started practicing together. It was around like 07. I don't know what it was that made us start practicing together. That was the year I won like my first jam. It was in Austin, and it was a 7 Smoke footwork battle. And I had been, I think, just in a phase where I was just trying to come up, man. I was in a crew that was based in Dallas at the time, but I already been living in another city for a couple of years, so I wasn't really training with them. And you know, I think we were in kind of different mindsets at the time. You know, I was trying to learn to dance and try to get my foundation and kind of branch out a little bit more. And so then Rudy was there judging that 7 Smoke, and then I won it. And after that, he wanted to train with me, you know, in Austin. And so I went over. I've been going over to his house to practice, and then you know, we were just like, okay, like let's do something, because at the time all the footage of breaking was on message boards. It was like B-Boy World, right? And I remember thinking like, oh, there's a lot of competition footage out, but we kind of wanted to just do something, you know, where it was just showing us getting down, like showing kind of a bit of a lifestyle behind it. My crew had done something similar to that in the past. They had like old projects where they would like film themselves in the streets and stuff like that. But we just haven't seen anything like that in a while. And we thought, oh, you know, this will be dope. So we decided to just like go around the city and make a video where we just were hitting up like concrete spots, just like hit and go, you know. So we were just driving around town and like we're looking out the car and be like, oh, that's a spot, let's pull over, you know.
Nice.
And he just like jammed something from his car, get out, right, and just get down, you know. Nice. It was super fun, man. And you know, I was still like kind of just really excited to be like, you know, involved in stuff with really just people that have been my mentors, you know, doing it longer than I have. And then Wicked was in town. And so we got him on there too. You know, that was actually my first time hanging out with Wicked, was when we did Bleeding the Block, like back in 08. So yeah, man, we made a video. It got pretty good reception, you know, at the time. It was kind of dope, you know, like, so yeah. And then after that, we just kept wanting to do more because it was just fun to do them.
Yeah.
So
was there I'm trying to remember, like, was there any significance behind the name?
Yeah, we didn't know what to really call it. We got the name from a guy named Blast. He was one of the Havikoro founders, and I think Rudy called him up and he just mentioned it one day. He goes, "How'd you call it Bleeding the Block?" Bleeding the Block is kind of like a slang term for just like taking care of your shit, you know, like in your area. Like if you, I don't know, like I may be wrong, but what I remember it meaning is like if you had like collected all your money or sold all your drugs, like, you know, on your block, and you like, you know, got it all handled, you were bleeding your block, you know.
Yeah, I remember hearing something like that.
Yeah. And so we were like, oh, that name's like, because we were literally out there like bleeding, like from our hands, because the concrete would be so rough sometimes when we get scrapes. And so we thought, oh yeah, if we like hit up every spot in our neighborhood, in our city, and like get down, it's like, oh, we bled the block our way, you know.
I respect that. Yeah, it was like I remember seeing that series, and just the first one too. It was like you said, a lot of the footage was just competition footage and things like that. And it's exciting in its own way, but it was so fresh to see, yeah, like the kind of video that you guys made, and like that that kind of stuff. People have done like similar kinds of things, but
Yeah.
it's just refreshing when you see someone do that, because like it's not so common that people will do those kind of things. And like you guys had really
Yeah.
nice like music too. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, man. Thank you for the comments, man. Like it's crazy. Like, you know, I still get like people kind of hit me up like, oh man, like I used to watch those videos. People I wouldn't expect, people who are like really famous now would be like, oh, I used to watch those. So I think it was just right timing, man, when we put that out. Because we were kind of amateur video makers, man, to be honest. The videos aren't like super high quality, like, clear, whatever. And we try to do like B-reel stuff, but it was like very like, it
but
was
that's
just like a
that's
few seconds.
that's
Yeah.
kind of like I don't know, it's sort of the appeal sometimes of like me
Yeah.
and my buddy Mark, we talk about this too, with like, say, a windmill, and you see a windmill and you can see someone who does like perfect windmills and their legs are straight and all this stuff. But
Right.
sometimes when you see someone with like bent legs and they're not even like that flexible, and they're just kind of like, they're not even like spreading their legs that much or something like that, and
Uh-huh.
like looks kind of dirty and looks kind of rough
Yeah.
around the
That raw
edges, and
feel.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, like something about it feels kind of like, I don't know.
Something about it feels b-boy, like
Yeah,
not
yeah,
Olympic, not like gymnastics. Something about it
yeah.
feels break b-boy. I
Yeah,
know what you mean. Yeah.
it's imperfect, and it's like it's
Yeah.
kind of beautiful because it's imperfect, because it's not so refined and
Right.
so like what's the word, like molded and like,
Hmm.
you know yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think we were also definitely inspired looking back by Wreck and Shop. That you know what I'm talking about? It's like this little documentary that came out back in the 90s.
okay.
It was like 25 minutes, all black and white, and it was about hip hop dancing in Brooklyn.
Oh,
It's called
okay.
Wreck and Shop in Brooklyn. Um, there's like one good version that exists on YouTube, but it was real rugged, raw. It had like the Elite Force,
Okay, yeah,
Mop Top
yeah.
people. When they were young, though, it was so crazy when you watch it. So you got like young Buddha Stretch on there. You got like young Caliph, young Link,
Mm.
And it was a really dope, like raw, just like clips of them talking, showing how they live, how they dress, how they
Mm.
just fool with each other, and then interspersed with their dancing. So it really made it look like, oh, this is like lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Think about like skating magazines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, back when like skating was starting to like really become like a cultural subculture. It would show more like, oh, this is like a kind of a young person's, subculture. And
Yeah.
so that documentary brought a lot of that rawness, and I think we were really inspired to try to capture some of that in kind of more modern breaking. Like, it's not always just about going to a jam, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I just do this with my boys on a weekend,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
what we do in our city. So
yeah. But the other
that's
thing,
the deal.
too was like just the kind of stuff that you guys did in the video was like not necessarily the kind of like crazy athletic physical feats and this kind of thing. It was just really like dancing and not necessarily simple, but like just kind of, well, I guess sort of simple, basic, but not basic. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
just feeling and dancing and moving, and like that's it. That's what I felt from that when I watched it.
Nice. Yeah, that's so dope, man. That's a really
Yeah.
that's actually a really high compliment to that, because that was kind of the feel that we were trying to get. Because we will film like a lot of takes, but it wouldn't be like, oh, we just want to do that same round. It's like, well, we got a vibe going. It's like me, Rex, Wick, Dave, and it almost was just like, oh, let's just get down, you know. I'm gonna respond to your round, or I'm gonna, oh, that gave me an idea, and I'm gonna get down. And at the end, we look through it. We scrap a lot of footage, man. We're like, man, we're gonna take the cream of the crop, like whichever round that you're just like in the zone, we want to keep that. And that, and the fact that none of us could do anything crazy anyway. It was like,
well, like
we have to play to our strength.
Yeah, but like you guys all in your own ways have your own, like, whatever you want to call it, like your own sort of blow ups, right? Your own sort of big moves and things like that. But yeah, just when I watched that video, it was like, you guys, you have moments where you're doing something like really interesting or whatever, but a lot of it is just, it just felt like you guys were just vibing. That's pretty much it. Like, and I always like that. So if anyone hasn't seen it, I highly recommend you just go and check them out. There's like 4 or 5 of them, or 6. I don't know how many.
It's like 5 of them, but we haven't done one in a while, man. Because you know, things got busy, and then, you know, I moved, and, you know, people kind of have different phases in their involvement, you know, and so, but it was a thing that I still kind of rep it in a way, you know, like even now when I if I go on a trip somewhere and I think it's a really dope area, either I'll just film something myself or with somebody else. And I would like to do a bleed in the block, like everywhere that I could go, you know, get a bunch of people on it, man. I wanted you guys to come on it, you know, and all that, but it's just, you know, it's a matter of, chance and opportunity, really.
Basically. And who knows what the future holds, right? It might get resurrected sometime, or it just lives for however long it lives, and it's maybe more special that way.
And, you know, we made a batch of Bleed in the Block shirts, and they were given away, and some of them were sold, and only a handful of people have a Bleed in the Block shirt. I think Jess Skills has like a long sleeve like sweatshirt or something like that. And I see her rocking it sometimes too.
But it's kind of cool, right? Like limited edition sort of.
Yeah.
I
got like a hoodie. We only made like 2 hoodies ever and stuff like that.
Exclusive, that's like supreme level or whatever.
Nobody knows what it is.
But then in the future, someone knows about it, and then it catches on for whatever reason. Who knows?
That's right.
But anyway, I was kind of curious about, like, you kind of touched on a little bit, and this is the kind of thing that gets brought up a lot, is just the idea of like originality and like just originality. And what I want to kind of start with is just sort of like regional styles. And like, in my opinion, when I was starting out, like, you know, the US is such a big country, and it wasn't like, you know, Japan, you kind of had like, well, that's the Japanese vibe, and this is sort of like the German vibe or whatever, this is the UK vibe. But like the US is so gigantic that you had kind of like a West Coast and East Coast, Miami, and like a Texas style. And that was like, quote unquote, you know, as much as it can be, whatever, like a unified style. But there was sort of like a vibe in Texas. For whatever like amount you can talk about it, can you just say what you know about that Texas kind of spirit or whatever?
Yeah, man. That's a good topic, because it's harder for me to say what that is now. As opposed to what it was when I started. And I think that's because with more exposure that people have to how people dance everywhere else, and kind of the competition scene, people are kind of like, they have the ability to design their style according to what they see. and it's all kind of mixing together, I think, now. While before, you were really, really influenced by the people around you, because that's the only place that you really saw breaking. Mm-hmm. And so how I would describe early Texas style is kind of a combination of breaking moves mixed with like a freestyle house background. And part of that's because like in the early 90s, there wasn't a lot of breaking foundation that was brought down to Texas at the time. What people were doing was what some would call like freestyle. They would just call it freestyle dance, which was kind of like a mixture of like hip hop, like New Jack Swing, house moves. But then some people will mix breaking moves in there. You know, they'll be up top, like doing mostly house, hip hop, and throw a 2000 into a split. Like people could do stuff like that. Right. So the power and the tricks and all that kind of endured a little bit more back then, before breaking foundation really set in. So then when people really started doing more breaking, it looked like, you know, they still had a little bit of that freestyle hip hop vibe, like in their tops and stuff, as opposed to like Bronx style, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say like not great footwork for the most part, but it was like, you know, not as structured. But you know, people kind of found their own transitions and ways to get into stuff. So it was a very like dynamic style, man. It was a very dynamic, explosive, you know, kind of power spins, freeze, heavy, and then the interstitium would be like original transitions. And that's kind of what it was. That's a style that I remember seeing a lot. But you know, we did have some footwork heads, man, and the foundation eventually made it here. And when I started, I don't know, like for some reason I just felt like I want to do footwork. Something about like the statement you make to me, like when I don't know, it was probably like, who was the first person that really put me on, man? Probably watching like Lil Jon or like, you know, Rudy in some of the early videos. Like I know they could do power, but I would see them throw around where they just did footwork and still smoke somebody. And I was like, damn, like I want to kind of do that, because that's like a cooler way to win. Yeah. And so that's kind of what started me on that tip. But yeah, a lot of hip hop influence, house influence. But now, you know, I can't really have a hard. I will have a hard time really describing it now. You know.
Yeah, I think like a lot of just, you know, since the internet kind of like became more widespread and everyone was using it, it's just kind of natural that people are going to see each other. They can see anything, they can be inspired by anything. There's less of that, like you said, that inspired by the people around you and things like that. And it's kind of like it's that sort of double-edged sword sort of thing. Like it's cool and people have created all kinds of crazy things, and at the same time a lot of people really look the same and they're doing the same crazy things, that kind of thing. Or the way that they're moving is very similar, even though they're creating maybe their own sort of things. It's like the same sort of style, that kind of thing. You know, and like there's no going back either, because like just like stop using the internet or something like that. Like, I don't know, it's kind of hard, right?
I think there's a lot of subconscious influence that happens. Yeah, like the more I've danced and been around different scenes, the more I realize that. And I don't think it's anything, it's not necessarily bad. It's just something that happens. Like when you dance around people consistently, it just kind of bleeds over. Little things that they do, little things that you do, it just kind of becomes subconsciously, I don't know, like influential to each other. the way that I was approaching a dance when I was living in Austin and constantly dancing with Rudy and Dave and Wicked is a little different from the way I dance now that I'm in Houston, and for like the past, I want to say like 4 years, have been getting down with like Palmer, you know, and Jeremy and them. And it's just like little things, man. I don't know. And I'm sure there's like pockets within even my city where people kind of dance and they have a certain style just based on just who they're around, you know.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say it depends on like your city too, and like how
That's
connected
true.
it is, you know.
Yeah.
Houston tends to have various pockets
Hmm.
of scenes, and you know, because it's such a big city, you know, you don't really just dance with everybody in your city all the time. And yeah, like I could definitely say there's like a Havikoro vibe and kind of a style that we kind of share subconsciously. And then, you know, there's other approaches, you know, from even other parts of the city too. So
yeah. Yeah. I also just kind of thinking about it right now. Like, I also kind of think maybe part of it is an age thing too. That when you're really
yes.
young, you know, and you're, especially when you're young in the dance, you're still trying to figure out like, well, how do I want to move? And you're still
Right.
trying to figure out what the hell the dance is even, right? So
Yeah.
like during that time, you're kind of like, you're a sponge and you're absorbing all kinds of different things. And if the internet is your source, then you're absorbing all of that stuff, right? But
Yeah.
I think like as you get older, and maybe this is just me, I don't know, but like I kind of got to the point where I was like, all right, I kind of know what I like and I know how I want to move. So I'm just going to do that. And like, I don't really need to watch all this stuff anymore. It's not even really that interesting. But there's like certain
Right.
people that I'll still enjoy, but in general, it's like I know what I like, and I don't know. I'm not so interested in watching all this footage, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
once in a
Same here.
while, you know, I'm not trying to be like an old man who's just like, you know, the kids these days, that kind of thing. But you know, there's a certain aesthetic that I enjoy
Right.
and a certain way that I like to move and create and that kind of thing. So I'm just gonna do that.
Yeah, no, I totally get you, man. I think that's exactly what it is. Like you refine your taste,
Mm,
and you you've been dancing long enough to know that it's okay to have what you like in this dance, and you know enough about the dance to really appreciate just that which you enjoy.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, man, I'm the same way. Like certain people dance, and I can sense a certain vibe, a certain like I could read into their approach and appreciate it. And on the other hand, there's a lot of people that just don't do that for me at all, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so yeah, it's just the same way for me, man. I'm really at this point more inspired by other styles. Like
yeah.
I've been I've been on a serious journey to learn how to pop for the past year.
I've seen it. Yeah,
And I feel like that. I feel like when I just started out and I'm like watching a lot of different dancers, and all of them are amazing to me.
mm-hmm.
And you know, but I'm starting to develop like, oh, okay, I like some things more and
Mm-hmm.
some things less. You know, there's
Yeah,
a certain approach some people take to pop that I'm starting to be like, oh, that's kind of a similar approach
mm-hmm.
that I take to breaking,
Mm-hmm.
and it resonates with me.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I study that, you know, how they like try to um, apply that to their technique, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that's been really, really like inspiring me on a dance tip. And even in my breaking now, when I watch how people approach these other dances, maybe I'm just thinking like it probably is because, for me at least, there's a lot more dancing involved in some non-breaking styles.
Yeah, yeah,
Not shit on breaking. I think you can dance just as much real dancing and breaking. It's just people can get away a lot
yeah,
easier in breaking without doing it.
yeah.
Um, so watching how like in it people are when I see poppers, house dancers, etc. That gives me some inspiration and vibe that for my breaking too. So
yeah, like I think I had a very similar journey of like just because of the nature of Vancouver, like the scene is like kind of smaller, so we, for whatever reason, and maybe it's because of our practice spot like Robson Square, that was like a hub for all dancers of like all kinds to just come, and you just meet everybody and people learn various things like house
yeah,
and popping and locking and hip hop and like partner dancing and all kinds of things, right?
and
And
so
yeah, and so being exposed to that like really early on, it's like you said, I kind of realized like, not to say that breaking you can't dance with it, but like people, like you said, people get away with less of it, right?
yeah,
Because like I don't know, maybe part of it is like the history of the dance, like it was built on like, well, I want to come up with my, these are my moves, I made them, they're
right,
mine, right? Like, and
right,
so it was an emphasis on like creating things and not necessarily like, well, okay, here's the colors that you have to paint with, what can you make with those limited colors? It's not like
right.
I'm making a new color, that kind of thing. It's
You're right.
like you've got red, blue, and green, what can you make with
Yeah,
red, blue, and green, that kind of thing. So
yeah,
it was like, and just the people that I met, like, and the way that they learned too was like, here's a here's a basic step. I think this like all their knowledge comes from like the EBs, like Poppin' Pete and
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
uh Wiggles and those guys. And it
mm-hmm.
would be like, all right, okay, let's look at like a twisto flex. And you take a
Right,
twisto flex, okay, there it is. Okay, now you've got it, you've mastered it. Now you just deconstruct it and you like you start playing around with like the timing and repeating things or reversing it and then going back, and like you're taking the exact same movement and like kind of playing around with it and that kind of thing. Like
yeah,
it's just one movement, just the twisto flex, or it was like a
yeah,
walkout. And how can you make that walkout like 8 billion different variations of a walkout and that kind of thing?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's so crazy because that's literally that's like the foundation of how they approach the dance.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how that's not really the way it's taught a lot of times in breaking, like
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people are getting it now, like a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people, but
Mm-hmm.
for a while it was like, oh, you do moves, like
Yeah.
that's what it felt like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Do a
there were only a
set.
few people, yeah, there were only a few people from a certain era where I saw that was like really like, oh, I could tell they're like on something else, people like Abstract, and
Mm-hmm.
like just I don't know, man, like to have that real like I'm just gonna deconstruct everything
Yeah.
and then just go deep with it type of vibe.
Yeah. Well, like a good example of that is bounce. And
Yeah, yeah,
just like a really quick example is like
right.
he was talking about like a 6-step, right? And he's like, you
Mm-hmm.
got the 1, the 2, and the 3, whatever, all these steps, right? And then
Right.
his crazy weird brain is thinking like, okay, we got like 1 going to 2, but then in between that step you've got like all these little, you've got like little bits, and like
Yeah,
each one of those can be a move in its
yeah,
own
yeah,
way. And so if you take that position and like do some footwork and go into that position, like you've got another move, and it's like breaking down a basic
yeah,
step into
right.
all these different things. And like kind of when you look at what he does
Yeah,
and you really think about it, like you really just look at it, like it's not that difficult. It's the fact that he's practiced these things like so many times that he can just flow in and out of them. And like, but like
right.
when you really look at what he's doing, it's like, well, it's kind of like basic footwork and then very small little changes and little variations and things like that that add
Yeah,
up to this like crazy round or something of just a billion different moves and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. I could
But
see
it's
it,
all
man.
kind of like based off of just foundational movements
Right.
for the most part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. really basic stuff. Like that's what I've been trying to kind of work on lately too. It's like my footwork has gotten almost simpler than it used to be in terms of the steps. But when I'm changing up, it's like my body. I don't know, like different parts of my body, like literally just moving different things, neck, shoulders, posture, stuff like that, you know, I wasn't really too keen on paying attention to when I first started breaking. But now I feel like, oh, this just adds a lot of variation. Just doing something very, very simple, man. That's helped me open up a lot with just different types of movements.
Maybe can you talk a little bit deeper about like just your particular like movement and your particular aesthetic and how that kind of developed?
Yeah, man. When I first started breaking, it was original, but it was really whack. That's lesson number one that I learned. Originality is not enough. It's dope, but it's not enough. You can't just like only for the sake of originality do something that looks really crappy because you don't have your foundation.
Right.
So then I spent like 2 years just drilling nothing but foundation. And then after that, when it started coming together, the first style I really tried to do was something kind of geometric. And I would say it was kind of like technical. You know, I was trying to make shapes and then variations of shapes. Like I will make a diamond and then I'll make an inverse diamond, like an X. And I'll play around with like going back and forth on shapes, you know, patterns where I, you know, change shapes like that in my footwork. And then just doing steps based on that, really. So that was like my level one, trying to like add something to the table type of thing. It was just, okay, I'm gonna do different shapes and timing variations with those shapes in my footwork. Then later on, I started to think like, well, I have all this, you know, this style is something I call it a style only when I look back on it and try to categorize it. But the way I was doing it was still like one move I had in mind combined with another move at this time. So then around like 2010, 2011, when I was stuck in Galveston, Texas, going to medical school, I started like approaching it like, instead of moves, I'm going to do whole styles just based on concepts. And so I started doing stuff with my ankles, started doing stuff with my arms. And, but it was the mentality that changed. It wasn't like, now I have an ankle move and I'm going to do that ankle move, you know, here and there, or now I have this arm move and I can go into the arm move. It's like, I'm going to do footwork and now I'm going to go into like ankle style. And like everything I do is going to reflect that style. And so that opened up a lot to me. And I started freestyling. I mean, I always freestyle, but I really wanted to learn just like to go more and more, like be really in it. And so really, I'll say like my style, the journey for me was just trying to be comfortable freestyling with everything that I have while retaining like the ideas and concepts. And I feel like now I've been influenced by the other styles that I'm trying to do, like popping and things like that, you know, just adding those concepts. But now I'm trying to bring an aspect to footwork where it's like I want to look like I'm dancing. I don't know how to describe it. Like I'm focused less on how technical I am, but more on how much feeling it comes out. And I guess that rough goal is driving a lot of my creativity right now. So, you know, like how can I make it look like I'm in the moment and my footwork looks like a dance, not just footwork. I don't know. It's kind of weird to describe. Because sometimes I see people do footwork, even though it's the style category of breaking. It doesn't look like they're necessarily even that funky. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so I'm trying to bring the funk, like the feel into the footwork in some way. I don't know, but what I know this is I can't be super technical. This is just me. Maybe some people can do it, but if I try to be super technical, the more difficult and complex I make it, the less funky I feel. Mm-hmm. So some of it has been stripped down, and I'm trying to manifest more of that vibe rather than twist turns up, up, down, left, right, combine this and combine that. So and then learning to just sit with the music, man. I always had a problem with rushing when I danced, and that's something that I think as I matured, it's slowly gotten better. But I always feel like I have a long way to go, bro. It just never stops. So
I think that's the sign of, that's a good sign that like you still have things to learn. There's still passion and desire to improve and get better, and it's like a good humble attitude of like, I'm not the best I can be. I'm not in a positive way, not in like a whatever, like beating yourself down kind of thing. Like, but like, you've still got more to learn, and that keeps you excited to like keep going in the journey of breaking.
The other part that I do think has really matured, I think does with everybody, man, that does this on a long time. It's just, I'm just less tied to the ego and the validation seeking aspect of it. Like I don't need to be, I less and less feel like being a good and well-validated dancer is key to like my self-esteem. Like that's just like that's something that I think everybody feels at one point when they like start out, and luckily that dies down longer you do this, and it really makes the dance a lot more enjoyable for me personally. Like I know where I stand in the scene and what I've done, and it's cool.
I think like as you get older too, you just learn to like, maybe part of it too is, it's again that blessing and a curse, like breaking. It's really hard for people to like make a career from breaking. There's less just like money in it, and so the people that stick with it, that don't get like, not to say that you're not like a well-known person, you're like one of the more well-known like people in the scene, but just the like, what I mean is if you don't decide to make like a career, quote unquote career, out of breaking, like the people that still stick with it, those are the ones that it's really something, like they don't do it for the ego, for the, I mean, there's no way they could, right?
It's a labor of love, man. You do it for reasons way deeper. And really like fulfilling reasons. But that has to come with a degree of self, I guess, confidence and acceptance already, I think. And so again, like my break-in reflects my personality reflects my break-in. It kind of feeds into each other. And so the more I mature as a person, I think the more my break-in, my approach to breaking kind of matures in its own way. The fact that I have a career and have to balance all that, knowing what I do in that role informs me in a way of, just what I'm doing, where I am in life, and that also kind of influences my approach to breaking in a very positive way, man, to be honest. Because I really try to break because I feel like every time I break, I'm loving what I'm doing, While I've definitely seen and experienced times where it's like, I gotta win or I'm not even gonna have fun. It's like the pressure and the desire is so high, for that.
Yeah.
And that's what I always wanted to just like not experience that. I want to get away from that kind of mentality. But whatever, you could say like there's a degree of privilege I also have too. Like I could think that way because I don't need to break for a living. But I know some people, that is their career, and I respect people that can find their balance really doing this for a living, because I think it's tough.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I just think like, for me too, it's a very similar kind of thing that like I don't really do this as like a career. It's just something that I really like doing, and
Yeah.
it brings a lot of value to me, whether I get paid for it or not. It's nice
Right.
when you do, but that's like a bonus.
Yeah.
The real like the real joy, the real like thing that you get out of it is that, that feeling that you get when you really like let go and just connect with the music, and it's just like, that kind of, what do you call it, like flow state kind of thing, and everything just kind of disappears and you get that moment of heaven, right?
Yeah. And I think it's so dope for like people to feel just connected and like carry the title, like be proud of that. Like it doesn't have to be that you got to be the best and for from whatever standards, I guess, at something. But like, because I get asked questions sometimes by people that are like, oh, they talk about like my career, like, well, how do you break and have work in medicine and all that? And they ask me, well, how do you do it? But the hidden question behind that is like, how do you do that and then become like known or whatever? And I'm like, I don't know. Like that's really hard question for anybody to answer. There's not like a way to necessarily do that. But I'm also saying like, but if that's like your only goal in breaking, then you may just not have a good time.
Yeah.
There's a degree of like, to me, there's a lot of joy in just saying like, well, I carry the title of a b-boy, or a b-girl. Like I'm part of a community and a scene that not a lot of people really in the mainstream still knows about. And it's a very special thing, to have this history and knowledge and connection with this whole community and the whole history, and to have put in work into that and just carry that within you, like that to me is really important, and kind of helps with the whole mentality behind this breaking thing and art, and the pressure to like excel and be validated in your art and stuff like that. Like, yeah, like that's always nice, but like there's a deeper reason to do this too, So
yeah, like I don't know, it just, to me, it always kind of comes back to this like idea that dance is just something that's like, I don't know, maybe in us to do. It's like in our DNA or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you want to move, whether you break or whether you pop or whether you just flail around. Like,
yeah,
if you get the chance and the music comes on and there's no one, especially like, it's kind of the basis of that old expression of like dance, like no one's watching. It's like when you remove that kind of judgment of outside people, if you didn't have that, what would you do? That kind of thing.
Right.
Like, a lot of people I think a lot of people want to dance and they want to move. And it's kind of like, maybe it's the Western sort of culture surrounding dance that like, it's about doing moves. It's about impressing people. And it's, if you do dance, I've said this a lot, like if you dance, you're a quote unquote dancer. It's not just something that's in the culture that you do. That's like, oh, you're having a barbecue and there's some music and oh, hey, it's kind of good. Like everyone just starts moving or whatever. It's just
Right.
kind of like, oh, hey, like, I don't know, Dean, you can break, like, you should do some moves, impress everyone kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just something that people just do, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah, man.
But anyway.
Nah, I feel you.
Yeah.
I feel you.
I wanted to ask you one more thing, and it's related to your career, I guess, in medicine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but your work within like the medical field is sort of related to psychology, no?
Yeah, I'm a psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was kind of
So I'm a,
curious, like,
yeah.
okay, go ahead. Yeah, you can
I would
explain.
say I'm a medical doctor that's specialized in mental health.
Right.
Some
So
people don't know the difference between a psychologist and psychiatrist. And
psychiatrists are allowed to prescribe stuff, right?
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure there's more detailed differences, but
That's one major probably main difference.
yeah,
In a
that's
nutshell, yeah.
yeah. So I was kind of curious about, yeah, just your thoughts on just dance breaking, but more broadly dance and that kind of thing, and the kind of mental aspects of it, and if there's any things that you've come across through your journey in dance, and then just also your knowledge of like just how the mind works and that kind of thing. I mean, you mentioned a little bit with like separating yourself from the ego and that kind of thing, but
Oh yeah,
yeah.
it's a good question, man. There's a lot of like, you could say, psychological aspects that you could talk about that somebody can achieve in dance, as far as like, but these are very vague terms, as far as like self-discovery, self-actualization, mindfulness of the self and all those things. But my job entails mostly with, I actually treat really severely ill people. I work in a hospital. But I do think dance, or really anything that has a community, and anything that generates some sort of creative outlet, is really good for mental health. Because there's a lot of factors that influence depression, for example. I'm talking about like major depression, and things like social isolation, loneliness, kind of feeling like there's a lack of connection, a lack of productivity, a lack of self-esteem. These things all contribute to that. And the dance itself is physically therapeutic. I mean, it's healthy for you in many ways to be mobile, to exercise, sweat, release the endorphins. But the community, I think, and having this just whole world that you can be involved in, is also extremely therapeutic, because it gives somebody, a community they feel like they can belong to, a social portfolio, people that they can connect with, and like also a place where you can get feedback, you can get a sense of accomplishment, really, a sense of purpose in something you do artistically. And having that, I think, is really important. I do think that having a complete kind of how do I say this, but like having something in life that gives you a sense of control, validation, that's coming from something that's more secure, is going to be helpful. So some people, if they get their entire validation from one thing, and especially that one thing is outside of just yourself, that can often lead to feelings of inferiority and depression and things like. For some people, it's like their work. For some people, it's like they get it from relationships. You know, for some people, it's you know, whatever, something else, right? And so dance could be something that plays a role in helping somebody develop a sense of just self-esteem too. Now it could also go the other way.
Yeah, for sure.
In many ways. I mean, you can also be just as, you know, validation dependent on just this one thing as whatever else you might get into. But, you know, the more you can diversify, you know, your identity and consolidate into just, you know, more than just one facet, right? I think the better you'll be off as far as those kinds of feelings go. So I don't know if any of that made sense. I just kind of felt myself
totally
go off a little bit, but
resonated a lot. Like I don't know, just my own experiences with dance and mental health. Like, I don't know, several years ago, like 5-6 years ago now, and my brother passed away, and so that was like the first real kind of like, it was very traumatizing for me because I'd never, you know, people, you know, it's different when like your grandmother dies. I didn't know my grandmother when she died. Like, so when she died, it was like, oh, my dad's going back to Ontario, like where he grew up, and it's like his mom passed away. To him, it was probably really big, but I'm like, I've met her like 3 times, maybe. So there's no connection. But like when it was my brother, it was someone very close to me, right? And like, you know, I saw him in the hospital slowly deteriorate, that kind of thing. Like he had leukemia, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, when he passed away, it was like a very traumatizing kind of like moment for me. And I didn't know, I never kind of experienced anything like that in my life. So I went through like a serious kind of depression, right? But dance, for whatever reason, it was like the only thing that I really knew that was like, that I did regularly, right? And like you said, it was that one of those things that gave my life sort of some structure, some goal, some direction, even though sometimes I was like, God, I hate what I'm doing. Like everything looks so terrible, feel so terrible about it, whatever. But
you know, that's me every time I look back at any old footage.
Right. But it was like something that guided me forward, even though I didn't really maybe even have a direction, that kind of thing. And like,
that's huge, man. Yeah.
But even like through that experience and then kind of getting through it, it led me into just wanting to explore like, how your mind works and all these different things. And like recently been dabbling more and more into just learning about like psychology and things like that. And psychology, and it's just the influence that when I was younger, my dad was like he still is like heavy Buddhist. And there's a lot of like parallels between maybe Buddhist philosophy and a lot of like psychological thought. What do we call them? Like philosophy, like ways of thinking, I guess. And maybe just they're said in different ways and things like that, but they're covering similar ground a lot of times. And it's just really interesting, like, and then relating that to breaking and what I do, and you know, the whole idea of learning to just like let go and freestyle, and like, well, what's going on in your mind when you do that, or what's not going on in your mind when you do that, whatever. And like,
sure, man,
there's like so much stuff to explore with that. And
it really is cool because psychological concepts are in everything we do. You know, somebody just at one point decided to say, well, actually, what are these things? Let's actually study it and put names to it. But from religion to traditions to like activities, sports, arts, everything we do, it involves basic psychological concepts because life is never ending stress and we're always looking for coping ways to cope.
Yeah.
And it could be, you'll see a lot of parallels, man, because really a lot of us cope with things in similar ways. Things that give us a sense of wholesomeness, wellness, gratification. You know, you'll see parallels of those same things in a lot of different things. You know? So I'm sure there's Buddhist concepts that mirror Christian concepts.
Yeah.
That mirror, you know, philosophical concepts. And it's really just how we try to cope with our environment, you know, a lot of the ways. But yeah, man, the when I freestyle too, like you brought that up, but this feeling of being comfortable in your own vulnerability goes big in freestyling for me, because you have to be kind of brave to do it.
Yeah.
And to be brave, you kind of have to be okay with showing a weak side of yourself if that ever comes out. You can't stop that. And part of it is that, you know what, that's okay, because that's me.
Yeah.
But that's really a huge leap for some people.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, really, because it really takes a level of being totally accepting of yourself, your strengths, and your weaknesses. And you know, it's very easy to not want to show any kind of weakness to anybody. But you know, if you're able to do that, and I think dancing and learning how to freestyle and learning this dance, really, you know, I mean, you got to be vulnerable just to learn breaking and get in the scene.
Yeah,
is what really kind of tempered that part of my self-esteem. You know, I don't think if I never tried my hand at breaking that I would be as confident about showing people, just, you know, like, I'm not perfect. This is where I am. That's okay. Like, I'm a learner. You know, that the humbling experience was a big source of my own, like, psychological growth, I think.
Yeah, like, it's kind of weird because breaking in particular is sort of built off of this, or maybe it's like hip hop in general, sort of has this like, be the best, you're the king or the queen or this kind of thing, like.
Yeah.
And it's very, in a lot of ways, very ego driven, right? This is my move, I created, this is like my style, this sort of thing.
Right.
But yeah, like, I don't know, a lot of people, just as they get older, like, that stuff just stops really mattering. And I think what you said about, like, you know, community and having a sense of community, that's, to me, that's the bigger thing with breaking. Like, the stuff that I remember the most is like the experiences that I had of, like, I went to some jam and, you know, okay, we entered and we won or we lost or we got knocked out right away or whatever, like, but then it was like afterwards, like, all these people from all over the world are here, and like, it's just cool connecting with people, whether it's on the dance floor or it's at the after party or it's at the hotel or whatever. Like, there's all kinds of these connections that I've made with people from all over the place, that because of this dance that we share in common, like, we get to be a part of this kind of larger community and connect with other people. And like, it's just a cool thing. It's a really cool thing to be able to experience, because not a lot of people get that opportunity in their life, I think.
Yeah, straight up, man. It's totally, it's really amazing, to be honest. Like,
yeah,
I mean, just the fact I'm chatting with you right now, you know, like,
yeah, exactly, right?
It's cool, man. I met you, like, in person probably just that one time when I went to Seattle.
I think so, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Pretty much. So it's a weird world, but, you know, yeah, here we are. We just had a whatever hour and 15-minute long chat about all kinds of things. And
yeah,
but yeah, maybe that's a good spot to kind of finish this off, I think, for now. I think there's a lot more that we could talk about, but we'll save it for another time.
Yes.
But yeah, thanks so much for just taking the time to do this and share your thoughts and your experience and all that, and just your story with everybody.
Yeah, man. Anytime, bro. Thanks for having me. This is dope. Always like to chat. And it's just good hearing from you, man. I know I've been talking a lot, but like, what's up with you lately? I mean, you can cut this out or whatever if you want, but like, you live in Japan?
Yeah. I moved here about 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I was saying before, like, you know, my brother passed away and that put me through a weird time. And
Yeah.
so I was going through some things and I was like, oh, you know what? I've always wanted to live in Japan. I have the opportunity to do it now. So I'm going to try and just see what it's like. And it's been, you know, like ups and downs and things like that. And I don't know, but it's an experience that I don't think I would trade away, that kind of thing. And
what part of Japan you live in?
Now I live in Osaka.
Oh, dope.
So it's kind of like,
I've been wanting to go. I was supposed to go to Osaka. I was going to take a vacation there. But then the pandemic hit. I had my tickets and everything. My girlfriend is actually Japanese.
Oh, really?
And she has family out there. So we were going to go and all that, but I couldn't make it. But are you, do you have Japanese heritage?
No, I'm half Thai.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my mom's from Thailand.
I thought you were like part Japanese, but I guess it's because I associated that with you moving to Japan.
Yeah. But, yeah. No, that's it. But like, it's kind of weird because I don't know. I've been thinking about this, and again, it's like, you know, just getting into psychology. So I was like thinking about how it was my early childhood and things like that, and it's the way that my personality and how I am. And I was always kind of wondering, like, because I've had some of my friends from Japan be like, oh, your way of thinking is very like Japanese sometimes, or or like just some people they'll like still say that or whatever. But I sometimes think about, like, when I was born, my dad was actually living in Japan and teaching in Japan. And so when I was born, as soon as we could, I was born in Canada, but as soon as they could, like, the whole family moved to Japan for like a couple of years, I think.
Oh.
And then
yeah.
So yeah, it was like early childhood in Japan, and then growing up was like there was like Japanese toys, and my brothers were still into like anime before it was cool, that kind of thing, and we had all these like Japanese comics and things like that. So it was a lot of influence of random things, and like we had Japanese like homestay kind of students and stuff like that, and so it was always kind of like around me. Yeah, I would say even more so than a lot of like Thai culture, which is kind of weird.
Right. Well, I mean, your early childhood experiences, it definitely plays a big role in how we view the world and how you kind of conduct yourself as an adult. So I could totally, you know, see that could have played a big influence. Like me too. Like I was born in China, and I lived in China for 5 years. I was really young though. I wouldn't say that influenced me too much. But then I moved to Puerto Rico, and I lived in San Juan, Puerto Rico for 4 years before I moved to Houston.
Wow.
And it was just a different vibe, man. I don't know. Like maybe it was that vibe that kind of cued me in to like try things like breaking and have a certain approach to breaking, a personality a certain way. Because I know on Puerto Rico, I don't know, it's kind of like it's very cultural out there. You know, a lot of music. People are very like, people had their own identity, and you know there was a lot of uniqueness to the culture, I guess, the way they talk, the slang, like all this stuff. And so you know, I think about that sometimes, and I wonder, you know, these are things that usually are outside of our consciousness. Like you don't really realize why you do certain things.
Yeah.
You know, but you do them. Yeah. And then sometimes you can really think about it and be like, man, why is that? You know, but that's only if you're mindful to that concept of psychologically, of being psychologically mindful. You know, most people don't ever really spend a lot of time questioning why they do certain things.
Yeah, for good reason, I think.
Right.
In general. Right. Like to an extent, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do it too
So,
much and you're just always second guessing everything. Well, why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? Why am I doing that?
yeah,
But
exactly.
for sure, like I think yeah, like you said, psychological mindfulness, awareness, or whatever. I think that's something that everyone needs to work on to some extent.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can apply it to yourself. You can also kind of apply it to other people, man. Like from my training, there's times where I could see it's like it helps me be less caught up in drama usually, or just feeling some type of way. Like I could see that, you know, when some people act and say certain things, they may be really just influenced by their own issues, you know, their own insecurities, their own feelings of invalidation, their own, you know, low self-esteem, etc. Because you see it a lot in breaking, a lot of egos, a lot of shit talking, a lot of behaviors and battles, and you got to realize that all comes from somewhere inside. And it usually comes just from the source is really just inside that person. It really has nothing to do with what you're doing or what another person is doing. It's all from kind of an inner process. And sometimes to be able to see that instead of just like letting the content and emotions come at you and you're riding with it, if you're able to see that and be like, you know, this is probably what's going on, and probably has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
probably helps de-escalate a lot of issues for me, at least. You know,
this is like something my dad used to tell me all the time, and it's like
yeah,
his kind of Buddhist sort of thinking. It was like,
yeah,
he'd be giving me a ride to school, and like you know, some person would do something kind of weird or dangerous or whatever,
right,
and like I think it was one time someone did something and I was like, oh, what a stupid driver. And he was
yeah,
like, yeah, maybe, but you know, you also just, you don't know what's going on in their head,
right,
and there's all kinds of things that could be happening that you
right,
just don't know about. And like they could be
yeah,
having the worst day, like they just got divorced or something like that, or like
right,
or you know, their loved one just died the day before and they're just like not mentally there,
yeah,
or they just had a bunch of shitty things like that they did or
yeah,
had done to them. And so it's just like, you know, give them some
right,
space or whatever.
yeah. Because when you really think about things like empathy
Mm,
and forgiveness,
mhm,
sometimes you think like, oh, does this person deserve that?
mm,
Or, you know,
mm,
like, do they really deserve my forgiveness or empathy? But you really aren't doing it so much for them as you're doing it for yourself.
mm,
um at least the way my take on it is that
mhm,
um when I have to, when somebody is like pissing me off and I have to dig up a little bit of empathy and be like, okay, you know what, there's probably a reason why they're doing this. They're dealing with their own demons. I'm not going to take it personally. As much as it is technically like letting them go of that, it soothes my own anger.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? It lets that go, because when you're holding on and entitled to a lot of anger, it really doesn't feel very good.
No, no.
Unless you're gonna go do something about it, in which that case, I mean, whatever. But you know, that may not always be a good outcome.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we hold on to anger because we don't know where to put it. It's a situation where you feel maybe rightfully angry, but you have no control over it.
Mm,
So by mustering up gratitude, forgiveness, empathy, you're really just helping yourself.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Anyways, that's
Yeah,
I don't
so
know.
that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we could just keep going and going and going and going with like these kinds of things, but because like we're any, but yeah, I think that's maybe a good spot. You know, just
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
have some empathy, and that'll help you and the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right on.
But yeah, thanks so much, and you know, I think you had a lot of really really good things to share with people. There's a lot of insightful things, and yeah, there's still a lot more that I wanted to talk to you about, but yeah, we'll try and do this again sometime and just get into that stuff kind of right away. Maybe we don't need to deal with any of this history stuff, background things. People will know who you are, and we'll just dive into it. next time.
All right. Sounds good, man. I appreciate you having me, man. It's been fun.
Yeah. And for everyone listening and watching, thanks so much for doing that. And we'll just catch you in the next one. All right. Peace, everybody.
Peace.
Now really vibe.